Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of 6 for 6. We have finally reached season 5, ladies and gentlemen. What a year that 2025 has been for 6 for 6. Let's just look at some of our stats before we get into the beginning of our new season in 2026 with season 5, episode 1, getting underway right here, right now. So, our overall record for season 4, ladies and gentlemen, perfect way to wrap it up. 77, 47, and 1. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that meant that our last episode for season 4, ladies and gentlemen, we went our historical 3 for 3. Like we said, we do this, we're pretty much 500 about for our pick'ems, and then we start to slowly improve where we get 4s and 2s, some 5s and 1s, and all that stuff to really open up the gap in margin. But I know you guys are wondering what our percentage we're looking like across the whole grand scheme of things. But for our season 4 record, ladies and gentlemen, we were 61.60%. Look at that number, ladies and gentlemen. That is a fantastic number to have. So that means that our losses were only about 37%, almost 38% how good we were. And then we had that one tie. So that was because of the MLS. That's the only reason why we have a tie. Outside of that, we could have 0% in our ties. But now you're wondering, Trevor, we've been doing it for the last couple seasons. We got season 2, season 3, and season 4 for our numbers that we kept track of our wins and losses for, which is great. Season 1, we did have some of that, but that was focusing more on different sporting events to get you hyped to watch those games with a couple picks in there. We may venture back into it to stretch out this program a little bit longer for other sporting events outside of our pick'ems to beef up this program slightly a little bit more than our average, 12 to 15 minutes. But I know with this being our first episode of season 5, might be slightly longer compared to the rest because we got enough to recap of our overall life of this show that we got going on. But that, yes, ladies and gentlemen, since we have records from season 2, season 3, and season 4 now, we got to talk about the lifetime of the show. We are 246 for our correct picks to 186 incorrect picks, 6 ties, and then 2 games that did not finish based off of some other circumstances because of what's going on for certain things at that moment in time. So try to look back at those previous episodes to figure out where those 2 episodes that did not be applicable for those most parts and why we have those 2 DNFs on our history for this program. But our lifetime win percentage, ladies and gentlemen, which is about 56.16%, looking relatively good. Lifetime losses is a 42.47% on top of that. And then our lifetime ties is 1.38%, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't do a whole grand scheme of things of how many picks we got right or incorrect in total with all those games. But if I want to do a quick selection with our wins and losses on top of that, let me just get that in for you real quick, ladies and gentlemen. So our wins and losses across the board. We had 440 picks that we've had on 6 for 6. That is a big number for you guys to win. Is 440 picks on 6 for 6 that we've done. And that's how we have over 56 of them correct. I think that's a pretty good margin if you ask me for over that many games. We should probably celebrate once we hit 1,000, and that would be a great day for all of our picks and have a big party to celebrate. Hair in my mouth. Yeah. But ladies and gentlemen, let's get the show on the road today. We got a lot of things to talk about. NFL playoffs are in, college football in the semifinals. A lot of great things to really kick us off in 2026. And what further way to do than talking about the Texans and the Steelers. Monday Night Football, ladies and gentlemen, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:15 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN and on ABC, ladies and gentlemen. Do it. Can you take the Steelers to the promised land to make miracles happen? It's not an easy task, for Aaron Rodgers when the Texans defense runs rampant and wild and shut down great teams. The Texans don't score a lot, but their defense caused a lot of pandemonium in this one. I definitely like the Texans to ruin Aaron Rodgers' farewell campaign, and it ends on wild card weekend. I think the Texans will find a way to get over the hurdle and get into the divisional round. Outside of the divisional round, it really gets up for them for the most part. So really unknown. They could get the Broncos and be a fantastic matchup to watch, or you have the Steelers getting through, and we could see what the Steelers end up getting as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, can Aaron Rodgers do it one more time? The Steelers out with a home record of 6-3 compared to the Texans away record to 5-3. So it's a very good even matchup for what we're seeing here in the playoffs. Even if we want to look at the last week 18 and what's going on, I mean, overall, the Texans have just been putting teams and keeping teams at bay at a low scoring. They kept the Chargers 16 points, kept the Raiders 21 points, kept the Cardinals to 20 points, kept the Chiefs to 10 points. But if you look at the Steelers, they're playing all their games close. So it's really going to be one of those close matchups where it's going to come down to the wire. Either Aaron Rodgers has to do a game-winning drive or CJ Stroud has to close out the deal with how great the Texans have been going. But give me the Texans to win this matchup. Monday Night Football, ladies and gentlemen, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:15 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN and on ABC. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, in the fifth slot, we have the mighty Chargers, against New England Patriots. Sunday, ladies and gentlemen, if that could serve me right, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on NBC and on Peacock, ladies and gentlemen. The Chargers have no offensive line. Can Justin Herbert survive this game? Can the Chargers finally get a win with Justin Herbert in the playoffs? The last time that they got into the playoffs, they've got embarrassed by the Jaguars. They got embarrassed by the Texans. And now what's next? They're going to get embarrassed by the Patriots. I think the Chargers find a way to get a playoff win with Justin Herbert, because it's really looking back on his legacy right now if he can't get past the wild card weekend. He needs to make it to the divisional round. And with Drake May out there with the Patriots putting in the work in his conversation for the MVP in his early starts of his season, it's a pretty good record that the Patriots have right now. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a tough one. It's not going to be an easy test. The Chargers were battle-tested outside of playing Denver when they were resting their key star players. They battled up against the Texans, beat the Cowboys, beat the Chiefs, and took out Patrick Mahomes, and beat the Eagles in overtime. So this Chargers team can find a way to win. They just have to make sure they can stay healthy in the playoffs to make a good playoff run. But first things first, take one step at a time, one move at a time, and give me the Chargers to get a close victory against the Patriots. It's not easy in Foxborough for the Chargers, but I think this will be their way to break their curse in Foxborough on Sunday night. Sunday, January 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on NBC and on Peacock, ladies and gentlemen. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, in the fourth slot, we got Sunday afternoon football. Niners, Eagles, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen. The Niners coming off of a tough loss to the Seattle Seahawks, only getting 3 points, but taking care of the Bills, the Colts, the Titans, the Browns, you name it. They've been putting in that work all the way through. But then the Eagles had their chance against the Bills, the Commanders, the Raiders, and losing to the Chargers in overtime in the last 5. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it is one of those tough games, but I think the Eagles are the better team. They're a more complete team, even though the Niners do have some completeness to themselves. But the Eagles had that stretch against, the Chargers losing in the OT, and then you have the Bills that they beat by 1 point, another playoff team right there. So it looks relatively good, but the Niners, ladies and gentlemen, had the Bears. Outside of that, they lost to the Seattle Seahawks in Week 18. They're also a playoff team. So you've got a really good mix-up matchup in this one, ladies and gentlemen. But like I said, the Eagles will take care of business. Even though the 49ers have a great road record with 7-2 for a away record compared to the Eagles 5 5-3 you end up getting. It's going to be an exciting game. I like the Eagles in this one. You can catch Niners, Eagles, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Fox, ladies and gentlemen. I got the Eagles winning it. Next up, in the 3 slot, we got Packers, Bears, the rivalry as old as time. It can't get much better than this. The Packers have beaten the Bears in OT. Well, no, that's the Bears beat the Packers in OT and a thrilling victory, 22-16. But then earlier in the season, the Packers won 28-21. I think we're going to have another close one in our hands, ladies and gentlemen. Will the Cheese Graters be brought out in Chicago, or will the Packers cheese stand triumphant and break the Cheese Graters of the Chicago Bears? Definitely an interesting one. Will we see a team with the tie to reach the Super Bowl? There's been a rumor going around that the Packers, anytime when their quarterback is at the age of 27, they win the Super Bowl. Favre, Rodgers. I'm just saying their quarterbacks have done it. I want to say Bart Starr used to be the first Packers quarterback in the Super Bowl. He was 27 when he won his first. So it's very looking promising with Jordan Love in that mixture as well, ladies and gentlemen. But can Caleb Williams get over? The Bears have been having a great season, but they're in a little slump. They lose to the Lions. They lose to the 49ers. Not looking great, but they could worst time. The Packers have been on a losing streak for the last 4 games, not looking pretty. But we'll see what ends up happening in this one, ladies and gentlemen. But I have the Packers taking care of business in a close one. It's hard to beat a team very consecutively back-to-back along those lines. But we'll see what happens on Saturday night football, ladies and gentlemen. Packers, Bears, January 10th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on Prime Video. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, in the 2 slot, we got the Peach Reynolds Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, January 9th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, ladies and gentlemen. Round 2 of Oregon and Indiana. We've seen the last time that they played each other, Indiana won by 10 in Oregon. Very upsetting about that. But Oregon came in and dominated Texas Tech in the semifinals. No, not in the semifinals, in the quarterfinals, 23-0. But Indiana dominated Alabama. Pasadena. We got a big game in our hands for the semifinals. A game that's going to be searching for revenge for Oregon. And can Indiana keep their undefeated streak alive and add more history to their program of reaching to their very first ever program's national title? If not their very first, first in the college football era. But they might have one in the 60s from what I can tell. But don't quote me on that, ladies and gentlemen. Definitely going to be one on the edge of your seats. I think Indiana pulls this one out. But like I said, it's hard to beat a team twice. Oregon started out slow against Texas Tech, and Indiana has been applying the pressure on their defense the entire time. If their offense doesn't stall, this game is theirs. They're a physical team. They're trying to make history, and this team, with what they got going on, beat Indiana getting this one out. But ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a barn burner from start to finish, and it will have you on the edge of your seat. So give me Indiana to win this semifinal playoff matchup. You can get Oregon, Indiana, semifinal, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, Friday, January 9th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN. Let's get a quick recap before we reveal the game of the week. In the 6th slot, ladies and gentlemen, we got Texans Steelers Monday night, ladies and gentlemen, January 12th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:15 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN and on ABC, and have the Texans winning it. After that, ladies and gentlemen, we have the 5th slot of the Chargers Patriots Sunday night football, ladies and gentlemen, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on NBC and on Peacock, and I have the Chargers winning this matchup. In the 4th slot, ladies and gentlemen, we got the 49ers Eagles p.m. Pacific Time on Fox, and I have the Eagles winning it. In the 3rd slot, we have the Packers Bears Saturday night football, ladies and gentlemen, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on Prime Video, and I have the Packers winning this matchup. And the second slot, ladies and gentlemen, you have Oregon versus Indiana semifinal, Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, January 9, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, and I have Indiana winning it. And ladies and gentlemen, the game of the week, Miami, that hurricane come rolling through against the Rebels of Ole Miss, trying to hang on in the semifinal Verbo Fiesta Bowl, Thursday, January 8th, 7:30 p.m. Miami stunning the world by knocking off the Ohio State off in the quarterfinals in the Cotton Bowl, but Ole Miss's hold my beer, and I too can pull up an upset, riding it out against the Dogs in the Sugar Bowl, I want to say, ladies and gentlemen. What a game it was. What a time it was. What was going on down there in the college football playoffs. I don't think you could get around from the intensity of all the stuff that they got going on in the world of college football. I just want to make sure I was saying that correctly. In the Sugar Bowl that Ole Miss played, it was a game that we thought Georgia should win convincingly, but Georgia fell apart at the worst moment in time late in the third, and Ole Miss rallied back, giving them hope. There's a lot of people believing that Ole Miss can do the impossible, go without a head coach to their national championship for quite some time for this program. Or does Miami think the U is back and making a statement that they said us Hurricanes will cause some havoc in the Fiesta Bowl out in Arizona? Well, the more you watch, we'll see what happens. I like Miami's defense. If they keep applying that pressure, I think they can shut down Ole Miss. But Ole Miss can be ferocious and create their own pandemonium in this one. But give me Miami to get this victory out of here in the Fiesta Bowl. You can catch Miami, Ole Miss, semifinal Verbo Fiesta Bowl, January 8th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, and I have Miami winning it. Without further ado, let's get a quick recap, and we'll get you on out of here so you can end up for you in the playoffs. Like I said, and on ABC, ladies and gentlemen, and I have the Texans winning this matchup. Fifth slot, Chargers, Patriots, Sunday Night Football, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on NBC and on Peacock, and I have the Chargers winning this matchup. Fourth slot, 49ers, Eagles, Sunday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30. I have the Eagles winning this matchup. And the third slot, ladies and gentlemen, we have Packers, Bears, Saturday Night Football, ladies and gentlemen, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on Prime Video, and I have the Packers winning it. And the second slot, ladies and gentlemen, we have Oregon, Indiana, round 2. Can't get better than this. Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, January 9th, Friday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, and I had Indiana winning it. And without further ado, the game of the week, ladies and gentlemen, Miami, Ole Miss, semifinal Verbo Fiesta Bowl, January 8th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific Time on ESPN, and I have Miami winning this matchup. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, season 4 was perfect. What better way for us to end 47-1 for season 4? And like I said, our last episode of the season for season 4 was 3-3. So we're looking better to top that off with a better record. And like I said, our lifetime program, ladies and gentlemen, we're at 246 wins to 86 losses to 6 ties and 2 games that were not finished in our program's life cycle, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of season 5 for 6 for 6, and we'll catch you next week for another round of 6 for 6. So long for now. Bye-bye.